Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lift Each Other Up. We are going to focus today on talking about managing your stress and celebrating your mental health. As always, from the past, what is Lift Each Other Up? So, if you all remember correctly, way back in October, I can't believe it's almost June right now, but way back in October, toward the beginning of the school year, we had a very successful bullying prevention series. And based on that, this beautiful premise around Lift Each Other Up was born into a webinar series. And so we just want to remind you that this is a very safe space for everyone to have an opportunity, and it's for students of all grade levels to be able to come together and have open conversations, very safe and accepting conversations about mental health, personal challenges, as well as giving you the ability to connect directly with us, with each other, and then, of course, with our special guests. And we will continue to connect you with others because we do believe that this is an essential part of your overall mental well-being, your wellness, and please know that we are always here for you. We are so excited because today we have Dr. Hughes with us. Dr. Hughes is a professor from the School of Education. We are very excited to have her with us to present today's special session. So good morning to you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. All right, so we really want to talk about National Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we want to go over some statistics with you and allow you to learn more about this before Dr. Hughes does discuss with us some tips, some really successful strategies, and how to manage your own mental health awareness and cope with the challenges and the stress associated with life, also associated around school. So first, let's just go through some of this data together. So 1 in 5 U.S. children and adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 5. Of that, we also have additional stats here. So only about 47.2% of U.S. children and adults with mental illness receive any type of treatment, whether it's from schools or elsewhere. And this was from a study in 2021. So not even half of the U.S. adults are able to receive that treatment. 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. And that serious mental illness can be debilitating, can cause vast amounts of stress, anxiety, panic, and more. And really, we all know too that when we are highly stressed and we are dealing with some difficult, challenging, or serious mental illness, that can definitely affect our overall, not just mental well-being, but also our physical well-being. Also, only 65.4% of U.S. adults with serious mental illness receive treatment. And again, this was from a study in 2021, but we're talking about these 47.2% of U.S. adults with mental illness receiving treatment. Of that, only about 65.4% of U.S. adults actually receive treatment to help their condition. Also, 1 in 6 U.S. youth have a mental health condition, but only about half of them receive treatment from the school base. So again, 1 in 6, but only 1 in 3 of them would be able to receive that treatment that is necessary for them to progress forward and work on their mental well-being. And then finally here, our last statistic, we have 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins at age 14 years old, and then 75% by the age of 24. But again, half does begin at a young age of 14. So before they're even considered legal adults, we have half the mental illness is beginning at such a young age, which is already a challenging, difficult transitional age for many people. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and talk directly with Dr. Hughes about how we can really work on managing, coping, working through the stress, and taking a deeper look inside the numbers. So, Dr. Hughes, would you kindly look at this and give us a breakdown, analyze this for us, and talk to us about what we're seeing?
Absolutely. And I'd like to underline a few things that you said on the last slide. One is the how common mental health and mental illness needs are in kids, and that when kids do receive treatment, most of that treatment happens at school. The reason I want to point that out is because the next slide talks about what is the source of their stress. And so you can also see the source of the stress is related to school as well, right? So you can see grades, looking good, being able to fit in socially. There's also a pattern that I'd like to point out, which is the mental health needs of children and adolescents has been increasing pre-COVID, but subsequent to COVID has increased dramatically. Of course, we've seen the same thing with adults as well, but we are at a space where the needs of kids have outpaced the services. And because school is both a source of support and can be a source of distress, it really is something to sort of keep in mind as we balance what do our kids need and how do we help them. I'll add just one more thing. One silver lining, I would say, of the COVID pandemic is that people have increased their own advocacy around their mental health needs, and kids in particular have been able to identify and say, "I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, and I really need some support."
Absolutely. And I do hear that often, even from family members, people are able to come forward and talk about it more freely. I almost think it's the age in which we live. I mean, I remember, so I'm 54, just throwing that out there. But back when I was a kid at this age, we didn't talk about this. It was almost essentially, it was kind of like taboo. It was something that you absolutely did not talk about. You kept it within the home because sharing anything of this nature was really not accepted. Ironically, including and especially in school and on the school platform. But as we're seeing here, and not much has changed from when I was a kid years ago, the sources of that student pressure still remain the same. I mean, definitely getting good grades, so getting good grades, not necessarily even being on the top of your class, but just being able to pass classes can cause such a great deal of stress. However, if you are of the mindset that you do have perfectionism syndrome or imposter syndrome, and perhaps that you did not receive the grade that you wanted or thought that you deserved, that could innately cause a great deal of stress academically. But think about that. Looking good. We live in a time where students are constantly on Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and seeing all of these videos and pictures and tutorials and of people going through the gym and working on fitness and, working on skin and everything else that students in this age group, remember, we're talking about, if we go back here, this starts as young as 14 years old and can definitely be triggered by these. But, looking good, and they're looking at all these pictures, Dr. Hughes, and they're thinking, I don't look like that perhaps. Which ironically though, those pictures are often, they have filters on them, and most of the people that we're looking at don't look like that, or we're talking celebrities who live in somewhat of a different world than the regular student base that we come across.
Well, certainly COVID was new to us, a once in a lifetime situation, but a lot of these issues are old. In terms of fitting in socially, peer pressure that go along with the typical experience of adolescence, looking good. But you brought up a really important point insofar as social media has not only exacerbated, that is, made worse these problems, but made worse these problems in a way that's more long-term and permanent. And so I like you, it was from an age where you could learn from your mistakes privately, and
Yeah.
maybe only a handful of people saw what happened, right? But now our kids learn quite publicly, and a lot of their growth and mistakes and their learning is documented very publicly. And so that's a very different type of stressor, in addition to getting good grades and those sorts of things. I'll point out one thing, that mental health challenges can start very, very young. And when we look at that statistic about the age of 14, what we're talking about is a full-blown mental health disorder. So you can have symptoms that may not quite yet add up to a disorder from a very young age. But when we're talking about what is going to be a mental illness, that is something that impacts people across their lifespan, we're really seeing that by the age of 14. And so all this is to say is to center kids and adolescents, and for adults to take very seriously the kinds of challenges that they report. And probably there have been generations along with the stigma that are like, they'll grow out of it, just give them time, it's maturity. And that's actually not what the data shows us. The data shows us that these are things that really do show up at this point in life, and it's not really just a wait and see situation.
Absolutely, Dr. Hughes. And I also think that that's the last thing that they want to hear, is that, oh, it'll be fine, you're going to grow out of it. I went through something similar, because, we're all different people, and we all do handle stressors in our lives differently than the next. And you brought up such a great point when you were talking about COVID. And it's just really interesting to see that when we're taking a look at this statistical analysis from the APA, that bottom right one, that 67% of students, and in this particular age group, or just generally speaking, but in particular 18 to 23, because to me that's still quite young, but they really feel that planning feels impossible. I mean, that word impossible definitely has a negative connotation to it, and that can be very challenging for this age group to work through, because not only can it feel competitive, whether it's educational, academic, or again, we've got sports on here, extracurricular, just fitting in with society, feeling that, hey, I look okay when I look in the mirror, no body dysmorphia or anything like that. But now it's coupled with, feeling that the future might not look very promising.
So I'll say a couple of things about that. The first thing is folks who would be graduating this year from college, whereas the first group that had their high school graduation disrupted. So that's the first thing. And while we do think of COVID as we try to talk about COVID as if it's over, right? As a succinct period of time. But the truth of the matter is that much of our socialization experiences were taken away from kids, not just during the time, but that ripples through, right? So we've seen learning loss, not having access to curriculum. We see learning loss, but we also see social, emotional, and stress buffering loss. That is how to cope with challenges. And so that we see this from the 18 to 23-year-olds as impossible. This is really the group, again, which would have had, if you're 23, right? So you're just graduating from college, would have had their high school graduation disrupted. And so it ripples not only across the lifespan, it is something that will go on to be, impacting a sense of mental health and a sense of well-being. So it can both be debilitating in terms of a disorder, but also just impactful in terms of a sense of well-being, and negatively impacting feelings of well-being.
And thank you for saying that, because we do need to discuss that negative potential impact that it has, not just because of COVID, but we are talking about that, but because of all the other potential stressors that, as we discuss, lead from and often are cultivated from being at school. So we have some tips here on how to manage stress. So would you walk us through some tips here, some things that you think would be very beneficial for not only the age group that we just discussed, the 18 to 23, but then also regular age K12 student ages as well?
So I want to start with self-care, and I want to also dispel a few myths around self-care. I think one of the brilliant again, outcomes of COVID is this idea of being able to take care and take stock of what you need and take care of yourself. One of the myths, though, I want to dispel is that sometimes when people have a hard time, it's like a circle, they get blamed. It's like, well, who's supposed to be taking care of you? You're supposed to be taking care of you. And if you're not better, it's your own fault, right? So I don't want people to get in that kind of a circle. I want them to see self-care in the way that it's meant, as a way of taking stock of what you need and then feeling empowered to respond to that. So if you look at the things that are on the list, like meditation, that is really about, again, taking stock of yourself. How do you think and feel? The idea that thoughts come and go, that things can change, and a focus inward to say, where am I and where is my stress emanating from? So sometimes people think of meditation as just a practice, but really the practice has a purpose. And so understanding the purpose of taking stock. Yoga is similarly is about taking stock of where your thoughts and feelings and stress is in the body, and then of course addressing that stress. Walking, spending time in nature, again, being with your thoughts and feelings. Eating a balanced diet, well, that's just your body not having to be distracted by dealing with processed food, again, so that you have a cleaner, clearer sense of yourself. And then, of course, rest works that way. So the reason self-care is focused inward is because it really is about the self and making sure you have a good sense of that before you start dealing with others and the other kinds of pressures. If it's okay with you, I'm going to go on to taking a mental health day. And I want to dispel some myths here too and put some parameters around this, because a lot of parents ask me about these kinds of questions. And again, what a mental health day really is really about, one, taking stock of what you need, and then two, giving yourself a break to do that. You can see on there is disconnect from technology and social media. None of these things include indulging in social media. Mm-hmm. But parents often are like, well, what if kids are just using this to, to get out of something or what have you? So self-care should not be about catching up on homework. Self-care should not be, oh, I need to study for a test and I didn't study for a test before. Self-care should not be about hiding from things that make me anxious, but rather the way to frame that in your mind is, I've taken stock of myself. I feel like I'm overwhelmed and I need to respond to myself and care about myself in this way. And as long as you're thinking about that as a response to your internal demands, I think kids and parents can understand that very well. Okay, so let's move on to relationships, because when we think about emotional intelligence, for example, the idea is thinking about yourself and thinking about others, and then how do those two things work together? And so relationships finds itself on this list because what we're saying is you want the kind of relationships that are what I would call, as a psychologist, stress buffering. That is, they help you manage yourself and manage your stress. Some of our relationships aren't stress buffering, right? And we can all imagine scenarios where we are in a social situation with somebody difficult that we don't want to deal with, and we say to our friend or to our parent, be my buffer. Don't leave me here, right? Don't leave me here. That's really what this is about. So when it says remove external stressors, we're saying don't put yourself in proximity to people that are going to not be a buffer type of relationship. And then reaching out to connect with family and friends. That is when people offer you support and people have proven themselves to be a buffer, don't be afraid to lean on them. Don't be afraid to use them as a sense of support.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I love the conversation that we had about the mental health day. It reminds me of that commercial that's out there. I think it might be for some type of childcare.com or something, where the children are saying, hey, mom, dad, guardian, you earned your time off. Use your time off. So, as important as it is for students and college age students as well to take that day and decompress and find that peace within. It's important for you listening in, dear learning coaches, guardians, parents, to do the same thing as well, because we are best helping others when we are in the position where we have it within us to be able to give back. So we have this slide here that Dr. Hughes, I thought it would be really lovely to talk about milestones and sharing mental health stories. So would you kindly talk about this and some advice that you have, as well as tips for the audience listening in?
Right. So if we continue with our same metaphor, thinking about the self, thinking about others, and then how that interacts, the beginning is really about celebrating yourself. No milestone too small, right? This is like, I did something I didn't want to do, or I paid attention to myself when before I would just ignore it. A lot of us kind of, work on the hamster wheel, and then our body gets sick, and your body's like, hello, you need a rest. And if we don't pay attention to it, then it becomes sick and is like, okay, we're going to rest one way or another. So even just noticing that you needed a break before your body had to is really good. And so treating yourself and paying good attention to that is really, really, really important. The part about sharing your mental health story has a lot of benefits. One is expression, getting it out. And we know that communicating and getting it out, art, music, journaling, all of those things are good for you, but they're also good for other people. They're good for other people to say, I'm not alone. I understand where you're coming from. I see and share some of the same challenges, which brings us over here to this random acts of kindness, because now we're moving from the self to the shared to the other, and really wanting to say, I value you. I see you and value you. And that the randomness is particularly beautiful, because it's really about saying everybody has worth. And I'm not judging you on all those stressors, your grades, if you look good, if you're, socially skilled or what have you. A person is getting value from you just for being there, and that's extraordinarily powerful.
It is powerful, and I really do think that it helps to increase our own mental well-being when we're able to give back to others, and when we see the positive effect that we have on helping someone else in doing something, even as simplistic as opening a door for someone. Or complimenting someone. It's incredible just how uplifting that is, but it makes you feel good about yourself as well. And then the hope is that it becomes infectious, and then maybe that person will emulate that behavior and that act of kindness towards someone else, and then before you know it, it's trickled across so many different people in so many different areas throughout the day or week. So, Dr. Hughes, we do have a couple of questions for you. And first, we would like to ask, how do I get better self-esteem? So if someone were to ask that, what would you say?
Goodness, so that's a complex question. So self-esteem is about a couple of things. Self-esteem is about the value you place on yourself, right? Self-concept, self-worth, self-efficacy. Who do I see myself as? Am I a valued value how I see myself as? And do I feel like I can get the outcomes I want? That's the self side of self-esteem. We've talked about self and others, so I'll say the other side of self-esteem is having an accurate understanding of who you are and who other people see who you are. And really what happens when we have self-esteem problems is we have an inaccurate identification from the self side, or we have an inaccurate understanding of how other people see us. And so I'm giving a complex answer because it's not just as easy as doing one thing, but understanding where the problematic view of the self is. Is it in you? Is it in others? Is it in the mismatch? A lot of times people see us as highly competent and we don't see ourselves as highly competent. It's that mismatch itself that is the problem. So how do you get a better sense of self-esteem? Again, taking stock of who you are and understanding where other people see you and having conversations about that. Start with your friends, start with your parents, start with your teachers and other people in school. Get a fuller understanding.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hughes. I agree with you. I think, getting an understanding from other people's perspectives and really even completing some of those interest profilers out there or interest analyzer forms, really super important. Hope index forms, documents. So there are so many things, so many different resources that are available virtually for students to work on and complete, and then perhaps even give that to friends and family members on behalf of them, and then really cross connect that data and see where it aligns, and then areas of a readjustment that might potentially be needed.
We have another question. Starters.
Oh, yes.
Conversation starters. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Another question we have is, my issues always feel so small. Why do they feel so large and cumbersome?
So this might be the same, a similar answer from before, which is other people might give you a sense that your issue is tiny, and then to yourself, you see the issue as much bigger, or vice versa. You see the issue as small, and other people think it's much, much bigger. And so you have that mismatch. And so again, being able to understand that mismatch is the starting point before you move to problem solving. Because what you want is, an accurate representation of the size of the problem so that you can pros and cons, see what's better, weigh what's good or not good. But if you have a misunderstanding on what the size of the problem is, that can be really difficult. And I'll just put one caveat, parents and teachers, of course, adults' appreciation of a problem may have a much longer viewpoint than kids' appreciation of a problem. So we also have to keep in mind that vantage point, that viewpoint.
Absolutely. We also have, do you have any tips on how to move on from your past easier? So how can we make it easier to move on from challenges from before?
So here's, a couple of things. One is the idea of understanding that your past has made you who you are today. And while you might have a whole bunch of different thoughts on what you wish did and did not happen to you, that's fine. But whatever did happen, that has brought you to who you are. And so there's no real reason to hate the past in that way. The next thing you can do, and sometimes this requires therapy to do, but is to realign your thinking of what the past means to your present self. So for example, this is an extreme example, but I will tell you, when I work with kids that are rape survivors, for example, and I already gave the clue, they will see themselves as victims, rape victims. And the idea is to say, yes, victims, but really you're a survivor. So how do we make that experience, which is extremely negative, inform how you see yourself today? Seeing yourself as a victim versus seeing yourself as a survivor has a much different psychological impact. And sometimes, like I said, that requires a mental health professional to get you there. But the idea is that you're not stuck. No one gets to define you. Your past does not get to define you. So understanding your past makes you who you are, and then reframing that as a source of strength.
And thank you. I think that's such an incredibly powerful message, that our past does not define us. Because arguably so many of us have been through trials and tribulations, and some more vast than others, depending on what transpired and what we've gone through at certain times throughout our lives. But to be a survivor, I've never heard of it explained that way, Dr. Hughes, and I think that's incredible. To change that mindset of, yes, something traumatic, something awful happened, yet thankfully you survived, and to move forward from there. I think that's such a beautiful, powerful message. So I just want to thank you so much for coming in today. Really important conversations. I mean, I feel like you and I can talk about this all day, every day. We can talk about how critical this is. I really appreciate all of your experience and providing some resources, and redefining and explaining for us, for the audience listening in. So we are very pleased and happy that you were with us today to talk about something so sensitive like this. And then
Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We also want to thank everyone who attended today. Thank you so much for joining in with us. We do hope to see you. We will see you. Hopefully, you're going to come and join us in June and July. We know it's summer, and we know that you have off, but the conversation does not end just because the summer is here. So we do hope to see you over the summer, including back to school. We hope that you join us for our next webinar. We will have information that we will be sharing out with you shortly as we continue to grow the Lift Each Other Up series. And thank you so much for coming in today. And Dr. Hughes, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.